Here are 8 extremely rich German people who wear cheap suits and avoid luxury, and their spending habits will leave you speechless. You're about to see a millionaire whose entire monthly food budget is under €5, a billionaire who haggled down his own kidnapper's ransom and then tried to write it off on his taxes, and how the richest man in the country rations paper towels and has just 3 photos to his name. Let's get into the countdown. Number 8. Heinz B. Let's kick this off with a millionaire whose grocery bill is going to make you feel absolutely ridiculous about your last trip to the store. Because Heinz B., an 80-year-old man sitting on a fortune of over €1.5 million, spends less than €5 a month on food. €5 for an entire month. And how does he pull that off? He gets most of his meals out of supermarket dumpsters. I know how that sounds. But stay with me, because this is not a sad story. This is a man who completely rejected the entire concept of waste. Heinz is a retired electrical engineer from Mersburg, pulling in a comfortable pension of nearly €4,000 a month. He could live like a king. Instead, he saves almost 100% of it. He keeps exactly €15 in his main bank account, just enough to dodge the monthly maintenance fee. He rides around town on an old squeaky bicycle. He wears donated clothes. And he collects discarded bottles out of public trash cans for the deposit money. So where does all that saved cash actually go? Straight into real estate. Heinz takes every spare cent and buys residential properties outright, in cash, completely skipping the banks, the fees, and the mortgage interest that the rest of us are drowning in. He's quietly built a portfolio of 10 debt-free apartment buildings and houses this way. And get this, he does all the repairs himself. The plumbing, the electrical, the structural work, all of it, hauling heavy construction materials across town on that same squeaky bicycle. Here's the part that flips the whole thing on its head. For Heinz, the dumpster diving isn't about being broke. He's a millionaire. It's a philosophy. He looks at how much perfectly good food society throws away and sees it as genuinely irrational, almost offensive. So foraging isn't survival for him. It's a statement. He's not poor. He just decided, a long time ago, that throwing things away was the real crime. Now, Heinz is a man almost nobody has ever heard of. Our next guy is the exact opposite, one of the most famous athletes on the planet, who somehow lives just as humbly. Number 7. Sebastian Vettel. Picture the typical Formula One superstar for a second. The Monaco penthouse to dodge taxes, a different supercar for every day of the week, designer labels head to toe, the whole flashy circus. Now erase all of that because Sebastian Vettel is none of it. And this is a 4-time world champion we're talking about, the youngest in the history of the sport, a man who pulled in over $15 million a year at his peak. So where does a global racing legend worth around $140 million choose to live? Not Monaco. He lives with his wife and kids in a simple, traditional farmhouse in the Swiss countryside. He shuns designer fashion completely, walking around in plain, unbranded shirts and jeans. And for the vast majority of his career, he refused to even touch the social media. The guy who drove the fastest cars on Earth takes his family on vacation in a basic Volkswagen camper van. But here's what really sets him apart. This isn't a man hiding from the public to seem mysterious. He's genuinely just decent. Vettel was repeatedly photographed after Grand Prix races while the crowds were leaving, walking through the empty grandstands, helping the cleanup crews bag up the trash. The world champion, picking up garbage. He also builds little ecological bee hotels with school kids. Oh, and he managed his entire career himself, all the contracts, all the negotiations, the whole financial portfolio, refusing to ever hire a talent manager. And what he did after racing might be the most Vettel thing of all. When he retired in 2022, he didn't go become a TV pundit or launch a fashion line. He enrolled in a multi-year, hands-on apprenticeship in organic agriculture, learning crop rotation and soil health so he could legally run his own climate-friendly farm. He went from the podium to the potato field, on purpose. It all traces back to his roots in a working-class town, where his father ran a small roofing business and taught him early that money has absolutely nothing to do with a person's worth. Vettel traded the fastest sport in the world for a quiet Swiss valley and a tractor. Now, Vettel walked away from racing to go farm. Our next man walked away from something even grander. He gave up an actual castle, Speaking of walking away from the glamour and keeping it humble, that is what pulled someone on our team to the Pulse R8 Smart Ring. It tracks your heart rate, your sleep, and your workouts straight from your finger. A week on a single charge, 100 days with the case, and it's fully waterproof. The part that got us was the price. Under $40, a fraction of what the big-name rings cost because it comes direct instead of through the retailers that mark everything up. If you're watching on your TV, pause and scan the QR code on screen with your phone camera, or tap the first link in the description. Now, back to the man who went from nothing to one of the most jaw-dropping homes in Germany. Number 6. Ernst Prost. Imagine owning a real Bavarian castle. Stone walls, medieval suits of armor lining the halls, centuries-old antiques in every room. Now imagine voluntarily abandoning all of it to go live alone on a freezing mountain and shovel manure for the rest of your days. That is the true story of Ernst Prost, and I promise you he did it with a smile. But first, how he got the money. Prost was the son of a bricklayer and a factory worker, and he started his career as a humble apprentice car mechanic. In 1990, he joined a motor oil company called Liqui Moly as a sales manager. And then he did something remarkable. Over the years, piece by piece, he bought out the entire founding family until he owned the whole thing himself by 1998. He transformed it into a global powerhouse in motor oils and lubricants, and eventually sold his stake for hundreds of millions of euros, landing him a fortune around 400 million. So you'd expect him to enjoy that castle, right? Wrong. On his 65th birthday, the day he retired, Prost executed a total escape from the billionaire life. He walked away from Schloss Leipheim and moved into a rustic, isolated farmhouse high in the Alps. He stopped going to the barber entirely, letting his hair and beard grow long and wild, a process he cheerfully calls Verlottern, which roughly translates to happily falling apart. He swapped his expensive business suits for cheap, traditional Bavarian peasant clothing. And now he spends his days shoveling manure, feeding horses and watching the cattle, living on simple mountain food and the occasional local beer. Why on earth would a wealthy man do this? Because he felt trapped. Decades of customers, suppliers, union fights, and bureaucracy made him feel like his life was controlled by everyone but himself. So he traded power, fame, and status for what he actually wanted: freedom, quiet, and peace. And he didn't forget the people who got him there. On his very last day at the company, Prost personally handed every single one of his 1,008 employees a surprise cash bonus of 2,222 euros. He pours the rest of his fortune into 3 separate charitable foundations. The Mountain Hermit has a very generous heart. Now, Prost gave up his castle to find peace. Our next family found their peace a different way, by staying humble for 3 straight generations and sending their billionaire children to muck out horse stables. Number 5. Heinrich Deichmann. Here's a genuinely strange way to raise the heir to a multi-billion euro empire. You send him as a small boy to go shovel out the neighbor's filthy horse stables. But that is exactly what Heinrich Deichmann's mother did, deliberately, to make absolutely sure the family money never went to his head. And looking at the man today, it clearly worked. Heinrich runs Deichmann SE, and you might not know the name, but it is the largest shoe retailer in all of Europe. We're talking around 4,700 stores across 36 countries, selling more than 150 million pairs of shoes every single year. The company has been around since his grandfather opened a tiny shop in a working-class corner of Essen back in 1913. And the family fortune now sits around 4.5 billion euros. Here's a detail that tells you everything about how they think. The entire company is debt-free, finances all its own expansion with cash, and flatly refuses to ever list on the stock market. No outside money, no outside control. And the personal lifestyle matches perfectly. Heinrich lives in a house in the Essen region that's nicely located but genuinely modest, with a standard indoor pool as basically his only real indulgence. He wears plain, unbranded business suits, drives standard domestic cars, and in his spare time he studies theology, philosophy, and history. Not exactly the lifestyle of a flashy international billionaire. But to really understand this family, you have to go back to Heinrich's late father, Heinz Horst. During the Second World War, Heinz Horst survived a gunshot to the neck that missed a major artery by mere millimeters. He saw that survival as a divine second chance, a debt he had to repay with his life. His guiding belief became this, that God would not ask him how many shoes he sold, but whether he had lived like a true Christian. That conviction is where all the money actually goes. Through the family's charitable organization, the Dykmans fund clinics, schools, and entire support systems for thousands of leprosy patients and impoverished families across India, Tanzania, Moldova, and the poorest neighborhoods back home in Germany. They genuinely believe the wealth was given to them to give away. Now, the Dykmans quietly run Europe's shoe racks. Our next two names invented the entire blueprint, the discount empire that nearly everyone else on this list copied. And it all started with two brothers and a corner shop that somehow survived the bombs. Number 4. Karl Albrecht. Almost every cheap grocery empire in Germany owes its entire existence to two brothers and a single corner shop that miraculously survived the war. After Karl Albrecht came home wounded from the Eastern Front to a bombed-out Essen, he and his brother Theo took over their mother's tiny neighborhood grocery store, one of the only buildings on the block left standing after the Allied air raids. From that one little shop, they built Aldi, and they did it by inventing a brutally simple idea, the hard discount store. Their method was almost shockingly minimalist. Stock only a tiny range of fast-selling essentials. No in-store advertising at all. Refuse to accept credit cards to dodge the processing fees. And just stack the products on the floor on wooden pallets instead of paying staff to arrange shelves. It was ugly, it was cheap, and it systematically destroyed every traditional supermarket on price. Then, in 1961, the brothers had a famous falling out over, of all things, whether to sell cigarettes. So they simply split the company in two. Karl took Aldi's sued, claiming the rights to the Aldi brand across southern Germany and eventually the UK, Australia, and the United States. By the time Karl died in 2014, he was the richest man in all of Germany. Today, his heirs control a fortune of around 27.7 billion euros, locked away in a family trust named after his own mother. And yet, this man was a ghost. He withdrew from public life decades before his death, living in a simple, unadorned home in Essen, wearing cheap suits straight off the rack, and dining on basic boiled potatoes and winter cabbage like any working-class pensioner. His indulgences were almost charmingly modest. He grew rare orchids in his personal greenhouse, and he loved to play golf. In fact, he built his own golf course in the Black Forest back in 1976. But here's the thing, it wasn't built as some flashy status symbol. It was built as a heavily secured private sanctuary, a place where he and his brother Theo could walk in total peace, without ever having to look over their shoulders. And why exactly were two grocery billionaires so terrified of being out in the open? Well, for Theo, that fear had a very specific, very real, and genuinely terrifying origin. Number 3. Theo Albrecht. Theo Albrecht used his pencils until they were ground down to 2 inches long. Let that sink in. This was a man worth over $17 billion, refusing to throw away a pencil stub. His frugality was so intense that people described it as borderline pathological. He walked through his offices turning off lights in empty rooms to shave a few cents off the electric bill. He haggled over tiny discounts on minor supplies. He drove an ordinary aging car and wore the same plain, inexpensive suits as his brother. Theo ran the other half of the empire, Aldi Nord, and in 1971 he made a move most people don't even know about, quietly buying an obscure little American grocery chain called Trader Joe's. But that same year, something happened that would define the rest of his life. Theo Albrecht was kidnapped. He was held for 17 days. And here is the detail that perfectly captures this man's brain. Even while being held captive by criminals, Theo couldn't turn off the negotiator inside him. He actually haggled with his own kidnappers, talking them down on the ransom amount. His family eventually paid 7 million Deutsche Marks to get him back. And then, once he was safely home, Theo did something so on-brand, it's almost beautiful. He tried to claim the entire ransom payment as a tax-deductible business expense. After that ordeal, he vanished from public life completely. He started traveling to work in an armored car, deliberately taking a different route every single day so no one could ever predict his movements. His one quiet joy was a private model railway collection that he kept down in his basement, away from the world. His son, Theo Jr., who inherited the empire, has spent his entire life fiercely protecting that same low-profile, ultra-private existence, never once granting an interview or stepping into the spotlight. So that's the family that locked its fortune away behind armored cars, fortified homes, and ironclad trusts, determined to protect every last cent. Our next man looked at his own multi-billion-euro fortune and decided to do the exact opposite. He gave the entire thing away, on purpose, and didn't leave a single share of it to his own children. Number 2. Götz Werner. Here's a question to sit with. What would you actually do if you personally owned half of a multi-billion-euro company? Now here's what Götz Werner did. He gave every last bit of it away, and he left his 7 children absolutely none of it. Werner was the founder of DM Drogeriemarkt, which grew into Germany's largest drugstore chain, with more than 2,500 stores and over 6 billion euros in annual revenue. He revolutionized the industry back in 1973 by bringing the self-service discount model to health and beauty products. But he was a different kind of boss. He threw out the rigid corporate hierarchy and treated his employees not as cogs in a machine, but as self-directed partners, trusting them to run things themselves. And his personal life was just as grounded as his business was radical. With a fortune estimated around $1.5 billion, Werner lived in a modest family house, wore standard off-the-rack suits, drove unremarkable mid-range cars, and always flew economy class. He filled his time with simple things: his family, his books, and rowing. Then came 2010 and the most radical money decision in modern German business history. Werner took his entire 50% stake in the company, worth billions, and donated all of it to a charitable foundation. He didn't pass it to his kids, he didn't sell it, he gave it away, and his reasoning was as sharp as a blade. He said, and I'm quoting him here, "Children have a right to a good start in life, but not to their parents' wealth." Werner genuinely believed that hoarding billions for personal luxury was a kind of systemic error, that money wasn't a possession to be hoarded, but a tool meant to enable other people to live and work with dignity. So he spent his final years and his own remaining savings funding academic research into the idea of a universal basic income for everyone. He took the most extreme step a rich minimalist can take. He handed back the entire empire just to live out his life as a simple, unburdened citizen. Now, Werner gave away his whole company to disappear into his ideas. But our final man might be even more invisible than that. He is the single richest person in all of Germany, and you have almost certainly never seen his face. Number 1. Dieter Schwartz. And we finish with the richest man in the entire country. So, quick question. How many times do you think you've seen his face? The answer is almost certainly 0. Because in the entire public record, only 3 verified photographs of Dieter Schwartz are known to exist. He has never given a single media interview in his life. The wealthiest man in Germany can walk through any crowd, in any city, and not one person would recognize him. And his fortune is staggering. Schwartz is worth around 46.5 billion euros, built on the Schwartz Group, the parent company of the discount giant Lidl and the hypermarket chain Kaufland. This is Europe's largest retailer, pulling in over $150 billion a year across more than 30 countries. He built it starting in 1973, taking that same ruthless hard discount blueprint the Albrecht brothers pioneered and sharpening it into a global machine. But for all that money, the man lives like a retired local pensioner. He's been married to the same woman for over 50 years and lives in a modest house in his home region of Heilbronn. He eats simple meals, often just built around local potatoes. He wears plain, unmarked suits from local department stores. And there's a legendary story from inside Lidl's headquarters that says it all. As the tale goes, Schwartz once asked that everyone in the building, executives and visitors included, limit themselves to a single paper towel in the restrooms, just to cut down on waste. The richest man in Germany, rationing paper towels. So what does he do with nearly 50 billion euros, if not yachts and islands? He builds. Since 1999, his entire commercial empire has been funneled through a charitable foundation. And he has used it to single-handedly transform his quiet hometown of Heilbronn into one of Germany's leading centers for education, science, and artificial intelligence, pouring billions into universities and cutting-edge AI research labs. He didn't buy a super yacht. He bought his city a future. And that is the perfect note to end on. The richest man in an entire nation, and you would stroll right past him on the street without a second glance. Because for Dieter Schwartz, like every single person on this list, it was always better to truly be something than to merely seem it. So, do you notice the pattern here? Every single one of these people had the money to buy literally anything on Earth. The supercars, the yachts, the private islands. And every single one of them looked at all of it and said, "No thanks." From a man who eats out of dumpsters by pure choice, to the richest man in the country quietly rationing his paper towels, they all share one deep, very German idea. There's a phrase for it. Mehr sein als scheinen. To be more than to seem. They'd rather pour their billions into schools, clinics, and entire cities than waste a single euro looking rich. So here's my honest question for you. If you woke up tomorrow with 46 billion euros in the bank, could you actually do it? Could you keep wearing the same cheap suit, eating the same boiled potatoes, and driving the same boring car? Or would that supercar be sitting in your driveway by Friday afternoon? Be honest, and drop your answer down in the comments, because we genuinely love reading them. If these stories surprised you, smash that like button and subscribe to Global Status, because we drop stories exactly like this every single week.